Hey everyone, this is Meg Frater. I'm a pharmacist and this year's APHA Foundation Executive Resident. Today we're going to talk about the FDA's proposed drug importation program. Last year, on December 23rd, FDA published a proposed rule that would allow importation of certain prescription drugs from Canada. FDA's proposed drug importation program introduces unnecessary risks to patient safety and threatens our ability as pharmacists to provide high quality patient care. FDA is seeking comments from the public on this proposed rule. And based on these comments, FDA may finalize the proposed rule without changes, make modifications, or not finalize the proposed rule at all. We need you to tell FDA your concerns about their proposed drug importation program. But to help you do that, we wanted to provide you with an overview of the proposed rule. In this video, you will learn about FDA's proposed drug importation program, discover how FDA's plans jeopardize patient safety, understand how the program will fail to produce significant cost savings to consumers, and learn how you can let the FDA know about your concerns about their drug importation program. Pharmacists are the gatekeepers of safe medications between the supply chain and their patients. But the safeguards to protect Americans that are in place to ensure that prescription drugs are manufactured, stored, shipped, and dispensed in a safe manner would be undermined if this proposal is finalized as written. So, how exactly would the importation program work? FDA's proposed rule outlines a program that would authorize states, other governmental entities, and wholesalers or pharmacists to submit proposals outlining plans to import certain types of prescription drugs from Canada. The proposed rule would implement a provision in the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act that allows and sets forth guardrails for such importation, only if the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services, or HHS, certifies that importation will pose no additional risk to public health and safety, and that it will result in a significant reduction in the cost of the drugs to the American consumer. Until now, all HHS secretaries in the past 18 years have said that importation cannot be done safely with reduced costs. Until now. There are many nuances to FDA's proposed program, but simply, this is how it would work. We've created an imaginary border here for you, and you'll see Canada is on the top half of the screen and the US is on the bottom half. An importation proposal would be submitted to FDA by a state or government entity with or without a US wholesaler, licensed wholesaler, or pharmacist as a co-sponsor. The proposal would identify a foreign seller who would be a Health Canada licensed wholesaler. The foreign seller would buy the drugs directly from the manufacturer in Canada. The drugs sold by the manufacturer must be Health Canada approved and conform with the FDA approved version. By law, certain high-risk drugs cannot be imported, such as biological products, infused and IV drugs, insulin, controlled substances, and other drugs that are typically high priced. If they could be imported, there is a potential for significant cost savings. However, they must be excluded by law. In the US, most prescription drugs are covered under the Drug Supply Chain Security Act, also referred to as DSCSA or the Track and Trace Law. Under DSCSA, drugs must be traced from the original manufacturer by documentation that must be passed with each transaction starting with the manufacturer. And each product, package, and case must have a DSCSA compliant unique product identifier to enable tracing. Basically, a unique license plate for each package and case. Canada does not have track and trace in place, so the packages will not have these unique identifiers. Under the FDA's proposal as a makeshift step, the foreign seller would add an interim product identifier to the package. Any relabeling or application of such a number would have to be done by a relabeler who follows good manufacturing practices. This will add extra costs to the drugs. This is also an extra step in the supply chain before the drug gets to the US, where counterfeit or substandard drugs could be introduced. We even heard from manufacturers in the US who also market in Canada that there is no business incentive for them to sell drugs to a Canadian wholesaler for export to the US. They would cut off sales. If that's the case, then where would the foreign seller get the product for sale to the US? This is a huge gap that leaves open the opportunity for the foreign seller to buy drugs from the international gray market and introduce them into the US market. Under the FDA's proposal, a licensed pharmacist or wholesaler can import Canadian drugs. However, before the drug can be sold or dispensed, they must be relabeled with an FDA-approved labeling for the US version, and the DSCSA product identifier and NDC number all must be added to the package. This will add to the extra cost to the drugs. Also, a sample from each shipment must be tested by a laboratory or by the manufacturer to authenticate the product, thus adding even more cost to the drug. Finally, after all these entities touch the Canadian drug, it would be introduced into the US drug supply chain for further sale to any wholesaler or pharmacy or dispensed to a patient. Decades of federal and state laws have created patient safety and drug supply chain protections to ensure that the drugs that we provide to patients are safe. FDA's proposed program bypasses these protections and creates drug supply chain gaps and vulnerabilities where counterfeits and other unsafe drugs can be introduced. Pharmacies have installed and implemented systems for DSCSA compliance. The proposed program undermines DSCSA, which is intended to provide end-to-end security of the drug as it moves through the supply chain. The proposed importation program does not provide end-to-end security. This is a huge gap that creates a disincentive for pharmacies that already are financially constrained to invest further in more DSCSA systems to comply with upcoming additional requirements. The proposed program would create pharmacy operation disruptions as well, and this could introduce barriers to access that may compromise patient safety. The FDA-approved and Canadian versions of a drug would be commingled in the marketplace. Both versions of the drug would also have to be stored on pharmacy shelves, and shelf space, as we know, is often limited. It's not clear how a pharmacist would know which version to dispense to a particular patient. If a patient's plan dictates dispensing one version and a pharmacy only has the other, the patient may not be able to get their medication when they need it, thus creating an access issue. It's also highly unlikely that there will be significant cost savings to patients. There are a number of entities that touch the product from the Canadian manufacturer to when it gets to the US for dispensing in a pharmacy. The compliance price tag is high. It would require relabeling twice and additional DSCSA requirements, testing, recall, and adverse event reporting systems, as well as even more requirements. Each touch adds cost that raises the price of the drug. So if there are any cost savings, they most likely will be minimal and would not warrant the risks posed by the proposed importation program. So if you're concerned about the risks FDA's proposed importation program poses to your patients, let FDA know. APHA and NASPA developed a short letter that you can submit to FDA so your voice can be heard. It's available on our webpage, and when you're ready to submit, visit the direct link provided to navigate to the regulations.gov site where you can submit your comment. There will be a box in the upper right-hand corner of the page that says Comment Now. When you click in, you'll have the option to either enter your comments into a text box or upload a letter directly. If you want extra credit after you've submitted, email us a copy of your comments at governmentaffairs@ephanet.org. So, what's the takeaway here? Patient safety matters, and as pharmacists, we must advocate for the safeguards put in place that protect patients by ensuring that prescription drugs are manufactured, stored, shipped, and dispensed in a safe manner, all of which would be undermined if this proposal is finalized as written. There is no evidence that drug importation, as proposed, would lower drug prices. While reducing prescription costs remains an important focus for pharmacists, we must emphasize to the FDA that drug importation is not the solution. Thank you so much for listening to this video. We hope that it's been informative, and we hope that it's empowered you to take action. That's all for me. Have a nice day.